Tonight, expelled from China, payback against Canada, the expanding diplomatic rift. A Canadian consular official booted out by Beijing.
We understand there is retaliation, but we will not be intimidated.
Growing friction over foreign interference.
Why would anyone believe that he takes national security seriously?
Donald Trump found liable for sexual abuse and defamation against writer E. Jean Carroll.
You know, what more could he say other than I didn't do it?
The verdict as the former president runs for re-election. Plus, a new message on mammograms.
Right in here.
This is the problem, and we need to update these guidelines.
Louder calls for breast cancer screening at a younger age.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina. Reporting tonight, Sandy Ronaldo.
Good evening. China hit back at Canada today, delivering a diplomatic counterpunch. Beijing expelled a Canadian envoy, matching a move made by Ottawa after a Canadian MP was threatened. There are now concerns and new questions about what happens next and whether there could be more retaliation as tensions grow between the two countries. CTV's Judy Trin starts us off.
China condemned Canada's actions. It is slander and political manipulation, said the Foreign Ministry spokesperson, then declared Canada Consul Jennifer Lynn Lalonde persona non grata, just hours after diplomat Zhao Wei was expelled from Canada.
We understand there is retaliation, but we will not be intimidated.
The Trudeau government took a week to weigh the risks and economic consequences after a leaked 2021 CSIS report revealed that MP Michael Chong's family in Hong Kong was targeted by the diplomat Zhao Wei.
We should be standing by our member of parliament, and we have, but we shouldn't be weighing that against how much trade we might lose.
But Canada does export $22 billion in goods to China annually. Most of the victims of Beijing's intimidation are members of the diaspora, people the communist government wants to silence, like Sherry Wong, who spoke out against the erosion of democracy in Hong Kong.
The day after we launched Alliance Canada Hong Kong, I held a press conference. At 7 a.m., someone called my hotel room, identified me by name, identified my room number, and said, "We're coming to get you."
Or Canadian missionary Kevin Garrett, who was detained in China in 2014 and accused of being a spy. Garrett told CSIS his family was threatened while he was in prison.
When they, falsely arrested me and actually abducted me, my family was followed by Chinese people in cars. They were Chinese. Their devices were hacked into.
CSIS has warned of foreign interference for years. The issue has dominated Parliament for months. While a special rapporteur has been appointed to investigate, the opposition wants the Prime Minister to take action now.
He's stalling on a foreign agent registry. He won't shut down illegal police station, and he doesn't have the courage to call a national public inquiry.
Right.
Next week, the Prime Minister will attend the G7 meeting in Japan. Expelling Beijing's diplomat may reassure allies as standing up to both Russian and Chinese aggression will be on the agenda. Sandy.
Judy, has the government of China given any indication that it will take more retaliatory action?
China does say if Canada continues to act recklessly, it will fight back resolutely and forcefully. One option for Beijing is to impose trade sanctions or ban specific Canadian products like they did with canola for 3 years. But Sandy, lives are on the line. Right now, there are 3 Canadians on death row in China, and the communist government could expedite their executions.
Okay. All right, Judy, thank you. China's actions were also condemned today by Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly, who revealed that Canada is trying for a seat on the UN Human Rights Council.
And we just can't stand idle, just screaming from, the sides, saying basically that we should be doing something without rolling up our sleeves and getting involved.
Canada will now campaign to win support for a spot on the council in 2028. Well, it took a New York jury less than 3 hours to find former U.S. President Donald Trump liable for sexually abusing and defaming writer E. Jean Carroll. CTV's Tom Walters reports.
Apart from the smile, E. Jean Carroll said nothing on the courthouse steps, but in a later statement she said the world finally knows the truth. Namely, that Donald Trump sexually assaulted her in a department store dressing room, then defamed her when he claimed her story was a hoax. So says the jury that just gave Carroll $5 million in damages in a lawsuit. Trump did not attend the civil trial, but in a video deposition, he called the accusations ridiculous and disgusting and said there's a reason he couldn't have done it.
She is not my type.
But what he seemed to think was a defense unraveled when he mistook this picture of Carroll for someone who was his type, enough to be his second wife, Marla Maples.
You say Marla's in this photo?
That's Marla, yeah. That's my wife.
Which woman are you pointing to? No.
Here.
Carroll.
Oh, is that,
the person you just pointed to was E. Jean Carroll.
The jury did not find enough evidence that Trump's actions met the legal definition of rape, but it did find at least the kind of sexual assault he has bragged about in the past.
And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
Grab them by the you can do anything. That's what you said, correct?
Well, historically, that's true with stars.
Trump's lawyer, Joe Tacopina, says that evidence, the infamous Access Hollywood recording, should not have been admissible, and he believes there are grounds for an appeal.
Because of some of the rulings and we believe a bias that was displayed by the court.
Trump himself calls the verdict a disgrace and part of a witch hunt. Of course, Trump is the frontrunner for the Republican presidential nomination, his supporters largely ignoring all the women who have said he's a sexual molester. The question now is whether it makes any difference to hear it from a jury. Sandy?
Okay, Tom, thank you. Moscow held its traditional Victory Day parade despite struggles on the battlefields in Ukraine. This Russian holiday marks triumph against the Nazis, but this year events were smaller than usual and filled with propaganda. CTV's chief international correspondent Paul Workman reports.
Victory Day is a sacred occasion in Russia, long celebrated with ranks of soldiers marching through Red Square and a rumbling display of military hardware. This year, that show of power was reduced to a single antique Soviet tank. For the obvious but unspoken reason, its faltering invasion of Ukraine. President Vladimir Putin spoke for a mere 10 minutes, but with his usual tirade of accusations and grievances against the immoral West. A real war is once again being waged against our homeland, he said. I salute all who are fighting for Russia on the battlefield. In a similar show of defiance, the head of the European Union traveled to Kyiv, there to announce new sanctions, but more to show solidarity on what has become known as Europe Day.
Ukraine has resisted the attack and is fighting back successfully. And why that? Because as a free society, Ukraine can count on the unquenchable bravery of its million women and men.
Russia also canceled the Immortal Regiment March, and this was significant, when ordinary citizens would normally display photos of soldiers killed in previous wars. More than likely, the Kremlin was worried thousands would show up with photos of loved ones newly killed in Ukraine. Looming over Moscow's victory parade was the likelihood of a Ukrainian offensive set to begin any time, and that got a boost today with another $1 billion plus in military aid from the United States, Sandy.
Paul Workman, thank you. The war in Ukraine has also had far-reaching effects on the global economy, and there were more signs of the financial pressures in Canada's retail industry today. Hudson's Bay announced it is slashing 250 jobs in the second round of cutbacks this year. The company had already cut another 250 workers and says the cuts are to corporate roles and not frontline retail staff. Well, a temporary reprieve today for fire-ravaged Alberta with rain and cooler temperatures. Thousands of residents have returned home, but more than 20,000 must stay away because with more than 70 wildfires still burning, there's no guarantee there's a home to go back to. CTV's Alberta Bureau Chief Bill Fortier reports.
Near the still smoky hamlet of Entwistle, Alberta, the damage is so bad you really can't even tell what was here. Another fire ripped through the East Prairie Métis settlement, destroying at least 14 homes, more buildings, and a bridge.
It was just burning like right there.
Raymond Superno is the settlement chair. He also helped fight the fire and will help rebuild.
The people who lost their homes, you could just see it in their face. What do I do now?
Oh, it's been hard, difficult.
One of those people is Jessica Big Charles. Her house burned to the ground Friday. She questions whether provincial crews could have done more to help.
We had no support whatsoever, and that's disappointing.
While many residents in the region are now back home, thousands more are not.
I've got my 2 prized possessions, my son Hunter and my son Chase.
Like this mom of 2 staying in a hotel and living out of a minivan. They've been evacuated twice over the last week and a half.
It's been a really chaotic experience, and I just want to go home.
The largest evacuated community right now is Drayton Valley. Residents eager to return, but officials say the fire is still too close.
Drayton Valley is still standing, so that's good. So we should be able to go home hopefully soon.
I do need to appeal to people that have been evacuated to listen to the direction of the local authorities.
Wildfire officials say overall rain and cooler temperatures have helped.
It gave us a chance to make better use of some of the resources that we have coming in and ensure that we can actually get those boots on the ground.
But the situation is still volatile, and hot, drier weather is expected later this week. The number of fires so far in Alberta this year is about double the average, but what's really astounding is how much has burned. About 750 times the average area. That's about 6.5 times the size of Toronto. Bill Fortier, CTV News, Edmonton.
A major health development south of the border, new guidelines to make mammograms for breast cancer screening available to women a decade earlier at age 40. It's something that resonates with doctors and patients in Canada. CTV's Manitoba Bureau Chief Jill Makashon reports.
Sherry Wilcox is 45 years old, a mother, a lawyer, a breast cancer survivor, fighting for almost a year now.
I had this lump, but I didn't really think I was going to end up being told that I had breast cancer.
Part of Wilcox's battle was simply getting diagnosed.
They did tell me to come back in, I think, 16 weeks to confirm stability. And it was kind of at that point that I said, that's not good enough. I want a mammogram.
For many women in their 40s, mammograms are often a request, not a recommendation. But in the U.S., that is expected to change. A national health task force wants to see mammogram screening for breast cancer begin at age 40 instead of 50 and continue every 2 years after.
The Canadian Cancer Society is looking forward to reviewing these new draft recommendations.
In Canada, breast cancer is the most common cancer in women. It is the second leading cause of cancer deaths. Some provinces are doing routine screening for breast cancer at 40. BC, PEI, and Nova Scotia, but there is no national standard. Groups like Dense Breast Canada have been petitioning the federal health minister to begin routine mammogram screening at 40 when the cancer is often more aggressive.
My name is Andrea Douglas. I found my lump myself.
Many survivors and experts say screening guidelines in Canada are antiquated and need to change.
I see in my practice women in their 40s who say, I've been asking to be screened. My family doctor says, no, I'm not allowed to. It doesn't meet the guidelines. And this is the reason why we have to update these guidelines, because they are actually harming patients and people are dying.
A Canadian task force on preventive health care sets the guidelines for screening every 5 years. They're set to be reviewed again this year. Sandy.
Okay, Jill, thank you. An Indigenous hockey player from Manitoba says he spoke to an American broadcaster who made fun of his name and has accepted his apology.
Some room for Whitecloud to move up. He shoots and he scores!
Zach Whitecloud is the first person ever to make the NHL from Sioux Valley, Dakota Nation. He scored for Vegas in the game against Edmonton last night. The offending comment was made later on a highlight show.
I carry my grandfather's last name, and nothing makes me more proud than to be able to do that. People make mistakes, right? And it's just a time for everyone to learn.
In a statement, ESPN's John Anderson said, quote, I sincerely apologize to Zach. It's my job to be prepared and know the backgrounds of the players, and I blew it. Time for a short break, but when we come back, clashes over the detention of Pakistan's ousted Prime Minister. Plus,
The bar is quite low for a 40-something-year-old mom.
On a roll, lessons on living with no limits. A political crisis in Pakistan with the dramatic arrest of former Prime Minister Imran Khan on corruption charges. Khan was taken from a courthouse by paramilitary forces. His supporters are calling it an abduction. It led to violent protests across the country and a government clampdown on social media and social gatherings. CTV's John Vanavali Rao reports.
Tonight in Pakistan, some fear growing chaos and anarchy, with unrest breaking out in cities around the country. Police using tear gas to fend off demonstrators. Angry not just about the arrest of former Prime Minister Imran Khan, but how it happened. What have they done, says this woman. Is it not hooliganism? Protected by bulletproof shields, this was the former PM earlier in the day, in a wheelchair taken into a courthouse, where inside, wearing sunglasses, you can see him as government anti-graft agents burst in, whisking away the 70-year-old to an armored vehicle which drove off. Khan's supporters calling it not an arrest, but an abduction, and claiming he was assaulted.
He was dragged, he was beaten on his head with wooden sticks.
Khan, a former cricket star, was ousted as prime minister just over a year ago. He's claimed it was illegal and a Western conspiracy, and has called for early elections. Last November, he was shot and injured at a rally and faces corruption charges, which he says are politically motivated. His supporters shouting the army is behind this terrorism. Khan is Pakistan's 7th former prime minister to be arrested, and members of his political party calling for protests. He says for Khan, we are willing to lay down our lives. At a violent demonstration in one city, a protester was killed when police fired warning shots towards a crowd. Several protesters and police were also injured. Some demonstrators say they won't leave until Khan is freed, with officials saying he's set to appear at an anti-graft tribunal on Wednesday. John Vanavali Rao, CTV News, Toronto.
Police in Tokyo have arrested 4 teenage boys after a brazen daytime robbery in a busy upscale shopping district. Their target, a luxury watch store that sells Rolexes. Video shows 3 of the boys smashing the glass cases with crowbars before running away with about $1 million in luxury items. A stunning development tonight in a case in Utah where a woman has been charged in the murder of her husband after writing a children's book about grief. Corey Richens is accused of poisoning her husband Eric with a lethal dose of fentanyl more than a year ago. The mother of 3 later wrote the book to help her young sons cope with the sudden loss of their father.
It's just comforting to them to know that they're not living this life alone. Like, Dad is still here, it's just in a different way.
Prosecutors allege she gave her husband a drink with 5 times the lethal dose of fentanyl, then called 911 hours later to say he was unresponsive. Still ahead, permission to land. A military bird makes a bold and unusual entrance. The guest speaker at a school event near Toronto made a big, splashy entrance. This Royal Canadian Air Force Cyclone helicopter is used for search and rescue missions. Today, pilot Major Antonio Gomez was on a personal assignment.
This is completely unreal. I never thought, in a million years that I would end up coming back here with a helicopter.
The 50-year-old was back at his alma mater to share his Air Force experience with students. The stopover was part of a public awareness campaign organized by the Air Force. Well, a leisurely outing on a Florida river took a sudden and terrifying turn for 3 inner tubers.
Jessica! It's alligator!
Seemingly out of nowhere, an alligator appeared, one of the women drifting a little too close.
It's hissing at her. Oh my God!
The alligator, though, didn't budge and everyone escaped unharmed. And a sad note tonight from the world of pro football. Joe Kapp, the star quarterback of teams on both sides of the border, has died. He was 85. Kapp, who was raised in California, played 8 seasons in the CFL with Calgary and BC before going to the NFL's Minnesota Vikings in 1967. He's the only quarterback to lead teams to a Super Bowl, Grey Cup, and Rose Bowl. His family says he suffered from Alzheimer's disease. After the break, it takes ability, speed, and style.
I got on a skateboard, and the rest is history.
To make it big on a board, something this mom is doing big time. We leave you tonight with the story of an unconventional TikTok superstar known as Aunty Skates. She shot to fame with her videos at a skate park. As CTV's Heather Wright reports, this mom is smashing stereotypes.
Dropping into an 11-foot kidney bowl is not for beginners.
Let's go.
It's hard, it's scary, and it's something Orby Roy learned to do just 2 years ago.
I'm going to be honest with you, the bar is quite low for a 40-something-year-old mom. I don't have to do much to impress people.
Roy decided to pick up skateboarding when she was 43 years old, tired of watching as her kids and husband had fun at the skate park.
And I said, you know what? I don't care if I'm going to be good at it. I don't care if people laugh at me. I just know I don't want to be standing on the sidelines. So I got on a skateboard.
She began documenting her skateboarding journey on social media. And when the pandemic hit, she started an account on TikTok called Aunty Skates.
In Indian culture, there's this trope of the auntie. The auntie is a toxic person who is going to tear you down.
So Roy decided to flip that and share videos to inspire, spread joy, and celebrate her heritage. This video of her skating in a purple sari has been seen more than 1 million times.
I want to be the auntie that builds you up and doesn't tear you down. I'm out here skateboarding in a sari. I'm not going to judge you for what you're doing.
Her followers call her inspiring and authentic. She shows the good and the not as good as she pursues a passion she says is vital to her mental and physical health.
You know, adults forget to play. We tell our kids to get off their phones and go outside, and then we continue scrolling on our phones, right?
With a growing social media following, Roy has been able to turn skateboarding into a career, partnering with Metamucil, Cheerios, and Best Buy, and hosting adult Learn to Skate clinics.
I really had no expectations of what it was going to be. I just wanted to have fun, and so I had fun.
Proving it's never too late to find your passion and, as Aunty Skate says, to live your best life.
Oh, look at that!
Heather Wright, CTV News, Toronto.
And that's our newscast for this Tuesday. Thank you for sharing your time with us. I'm Sandy Ronaldo for Omar. All of us here at CTV National News, have a good night. We'll see you tomorrow.